I was drying a dinner plate when my son said, "Mom, Laura's parents are moving in tomorrow. You've done your part." I laughed, until he added, cold and steady, "We changed the locks. Don't come back." The plate slipped. It shattered on the floor. On the table lay an envelope. Property transfer, signed by Ethan Miller and Laura Bennett. My name wasn't there. My home wasn't mine. And my son wasn't my son anymore. If you want to hear my full story, subscribe, and tell me which city you're watching from, because this is how I learned what betrayal really sounds like. My name is Margaret Miller, though most people still call me Maggie from my nursing days. I turned 67 this year. Widow. Retired nurse. 30 years of night shifts, double weekends, and holidays spent in quiet wards where the hum of machines replaced conversation. Every hour I worked was a brick in the house I built, the one by the sea with blue shutters and a lemon tree by the porch. When my husband, Richard, passed away 12 years ago, the house became my anchor. It was where I learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. I kept his coat in the hallway, not out of denial but because it smelled faintly of cedar. That small comfort carried me through more nights than I can count. My son Ethan was my pride, my reason. He was born premature, barely 4 pounds, and I spent the first weeks of his life sleeping in a hospital chair, feeding him through a tube, whispering promises I intended to keep. I kept them all: school trips, braces, tuition, rent. Every milestone paid in full, not out of duty but love. When he graduated, I cried in the third row, clutching a handkerchief embroidered with his initials. He hugged me afterward and said, "You're my hero, Mom." I believed him. Then came Laura. Bright smile, sharp heels, the kind of confidence that fills a room before she speaks. Ethan brought her home one spring Sunday, introducing her as the one. I remember the way she looked around the house, her gaze pausing on every framed photo, every antique cup, like she was cataloging them. Still, I welcomed her. I cooked roast chicken, poured white wine, and told myself love needed space to grow. In those early years, I helped them when I could. Their first apartment had mold and thin walls. I lent them $2,000 for a deposit. When their car broke down, I paid half for the repairs. I didn't keep receipts. Love doesn't issue invoices. They called every Sunday, sometimes dropping by for dinner. Ethan would fix the Wi-Fi, Laura would compliment my curtains. She always had suggestions. "You could open this wall, make it modern," or "that spare room would make a great nursery someday." I smiled, thinking it was just conversation. When they married, I gifted them $10,000. My savings, yes, but it felt right. I wanted them to start without the heaviness of debt. I stood beside Ethan at the altar, holding back tears as he vowed to honor and protect. His hand shook slightly. I thought it was emotion. Years passed. I noticed changes, small at first, like the way he began calling less. Holidays shortened from a week to a day, then a few hours. Messages grew formal. "Hi Mom, just checking in." Gone was the warmth, replaced by efficiency. Laura started managing the conversations. "Ethan's busy with work," she'd say, answering his phone. "He'll call when he can." I told myself to be patient, that life has seasons. Then came the house visits. They'd arrive with plans, not questions. "You should think about downsizing. This place must be a lot for you alone." Ethan smiled apologetically, as if rehearsed. I laughed it off, but each remark landed like a quiet warning. The first rail crack appeared at a dinner I hosted last fall. Roast lamb, candlelight, calm weather outside. Laura traced her finger along the dining table and said, half joking, "We'd knock down this wall one day, make the kitchen bigger. Maybe when the house is ours." Ethan laughed, not nervously but knowingly. I caught the look they shared, a flicker of agreement disguised as humor. After that, distance grew like ivy. They stopped inviting me over. When I dropped by, the air felt stiff, as if my presence disrupted something planned. My birthday passed with a text. "Love you, Mom. Busy weekend." Still, I kept giving. Groceries when they were short. Babysitting their dog during trips. Loaning my car for a week that turned into a month. It wasn't sacrifice, it was habit. That's what mothers do. We fill gaps before anyone asks. Looking back now, I see the pattern clearly. They weren't building a life with me. They were rehearsing how to build one without me. Each favor softened the boundaries until I couldn't tell where generosity ended and erasure began. Yet I held on to the idea of family, to the belief that love repays itself eventually. The house stayed bright. I polished the floors, watered the lemon tree, kept Ethan's old room untouched. His trophies lined the shelf. His childhood drawings still hung crooked on the wall. I thought that preserving memories was a way of keeping us connected. I didn't realize it made the house easier to take. When Laura mentioned her parents' financial troubles, I offered sympathy. I never imagined she'd use my kindness as a blueprint for conquest. But people show who they are when they start planning your absence. I can still recall her words from that winter afternoon, light, casual, devastating in hindsight. "You've done so much, Margaret. You must be ready to relax, maybe travel." At the time I smiled. "Maybe," I said. "One day." Now I understand what she really meant. "We're almost ready for you to move aside." I tell this not for pity but for truth. The world rarely warns us when loyalty becomes leverage. Sometimes betrayal walks in smiling, holding a casserole dish, calling you mom. And by the time you recognize it, you've already handed them the spare keys. It started over stew and soft music, a Tuesday night with rain ticking. I set out cloth napkins, the blue ones Ethan liked. We had nothing heavy to discuss. I'd made lemon custard for dessert and poured wine. Laura arrived in a blazer, and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. We ate in the familiar rhythm of family, passed the salt, mind the bones, until she tapped the dining room wall with one manicured finger. Again. "This," she said, bright, "would come down easily. Open the space. Modernize. We'd get sunlight straight through to the hallway." I waited for the punchline. Ethan cleared his throat and reached for the bread. "Laura loves design shows," she added, breezy. "Maybe when the house is ours." The clock in the hall made a clean little click. No one laughed. I felt the air change, the way a ward grows quiet when a monitor slips into warning. I folded my napkin slowly, as if the fabric could answer for me. "Yours," I said. Laura shrugged, friendly on the surface, a hint of challenge underneath. "One day." Ethan looked down. He didn't deny it. He didn't say, "Mom, she's kidding." He just buttered a slice of bread with small, precise strokes, like every word might break the crust. I changed the subject because that's what mothers do when peace is fragile. Weather, work, the lemon tree on the porch. But the remark nested in the room like a bird that had decided to stay. After they left, I washed the dishes and set the blue napkins to dry. The house felt a degree colder, though the heater hummed the same. In bed I replayed the moment. I have learned to listen for subtext. Nurses do. A joke is often a trial balloon. If it floats, it returns heavier next time. Carrying plans. A week later, Laura sent me a link to a kitchen renovation. "Sleek lines," her message read. "It's the look." No question mark. I thanked her, then put my phone face down. The screen left a faint rectangle on the table, like a footprint. I noticed Ethan's new habit, arriving late and leaving early. He stood in doorways instead of sitting, as if chairs were commitments. "Work's wild," he said. I nodded. He kept his coat on. At church, Mrs. Donnelly asked how the young couple was doing. "Settled," she said. The word snagged me. Settled where? In their apartment, or in an expectation I hadn't agreed to? I smiled and deflected. "Busy," I said. It was true, and yet it wasn't. The first crack isn't dramatic. It's quiet, almost polite. It arrives as a suggestion you're meant to bless. Downsize, relax, travel. The verbs sounded like gifts and felt like orders. I began to test my boundaries the way I used to test 4 lines, gently checking for leaks. I asked Ethan if we could mark a Sunday each month for dinner. "Let's play it by ear," he replied. Ear meant never. On short notice, he canceled twice. Something came up. I kept the stew warm until it wasn't, then put it away. I also started noticing my name vanishing from stories. "We helped with the deposit," I heard Ethan say to a friend, glossing over my check. Laura laughed about our oven when guests were over, though she'd never scrubbed its trays. Tiny edits, harmless alone, but together they rewrote authorship. One afternoon in February, I found a measuring tape on the counter. Yellow, new, not mine. Numbers sprawled across the wood like a whisper turned visible. I called Ethan. "Were you measuring something?" A pause. "Just thinking aloud." "About what?" "The future," he said. I stood very still. The silence stretched, then snapped. All right. I returned the tape to a drawer and closed it softly. The click sounded like a small door somewhere inside me choosing to lock. That night I made tea and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page I wrote 3 lines. Title still in my control. Foundation holds ownership. Trust your read of the room. I underlined the third. I poured honey, turned the page and wrote dates. When comments were made, when visits shortened, when laughter turned to logistics. It wasn't paranoia. It was record-keeping. A skill honed across a career where charts save lives and timelines clarify truth. A first crack can be repaired if everyone wants the wall to hold. But when the crack becomes a plan, repair is cosmetic. I pressed my palm to the dining room wall Laura had tapped. The paint felt cool, steady, innocent. Still, I heard her sentence like a faint vibration. Maybe when the house is ours. The rain returned that weekend, blowing hard from the sea. I set a towel by the door for the dog they sometimes asked me to keep. He didn't come. No one did. The house was quiet, and for the first time the quiet felt like a verdict. I brewed another pot of tea and opened the notebook again. Under the date I added a 4th line. Change the locks before they do. I didn't do it then. I wasn't ready. But the sentence sat there, calm and waiting the way a good decision does, present long before you act. The week after the dinner remark, life tilted by degrees. Not a storm, just edits to the script of home. My spare key began catching in the lock, a half-turn that resisted like a quiet no. I blamed the salt air. It worked then didn't. Doors don't lie, they hesitate first. Mom, you're too involved, Laura said over coffee, diagnosing me with a smile. We're building our own rhythm. Ethan nodded without meeting my eyes. I steadied my cup so it wouldn't rattle. The china was my mother's. 2 days later, boxes lined the hallway. My photographs, Ethan's gap-toothed grin, Richard with a kite, were down to make space for new memories. Brown paper. Neat labels in Laura's hand. Family room archive. Archive meant away. I stood there with tape stuck to my finger, feeling like a guest. I called Ethan. Who packed these? Laura was cleaning. We thought it might help with flow. Whose flow? Mom, don't make it a big deal, he said gently. Change is good. Change is good when you choose it. The Wi-Fi password changed next. Ethan texted me a new one, only it didn't work. We're on a different plan now, he replied. Plan I wasn't in. The printer stopped pairing. On my desk, a brochure for retirement communities. Just exploring options, Laura wrote with a smiley face. Exploration that pointed one direction, out. At church, I sat 2 pews farther back so leaving would be easier when emotion rose. Mrs. Donnelly squeezed my hand. You look tired. I said I was fine. The word felt empty, like a pocket turned inside out. I kept a list of the closures. Keys that stuck. Photos boxed. A casserole returned in a throwaway tin instead of my dish. We'll get it back to you, Laura texted. She didn't. I wrote it down. Not pettiness, clarity. Pattern is a map. On a Thursday in March, my bedroom window was open and the lemon tree's petals were on the quilt. On the bureau, a note. Stager stopped by to get ideas for maximizing the space. Stager. No one had asked. My room had become a set. I called my lawyer friend, Kelly. Hypothetically, I said. If someone acts like a house is theirs. Hypothetically, she said. Keep your documents close. Title Trust Foundation. Only where you can reach. That night, I took the file from the safe and traced the embossed seal. The Miller Foundation. Richard and I set it up to keep the house anchored. Paper isn't love, but it protects it. Ethan shifted to plural possessives. Our schedule, our budget, our plan for the property. The property. He never used to call it that. It had been the house, the porch, the lemon tree, the door frame where he marked birthdays. I wanted to correct him with the word that lived under all the others, home. I tried one more olive branch dinner. Roast chicken, rosemary, potatoes crisped in the pan. Blue napkins again. They were late. Laura arrived with a printed itinerary. Her parents moving from Ohio, their lease ending, their boxes in storage. Dates and bullet points. My name appeared once, Margaret's room, TOB converted. I read the page. This is my home, I said, even quiet. It's our family's future, Laura said. Ethan reached, then didn't quite touch my hand. Mom, please don't overreact. Overreact is the word used when a boundary resists being erased. I cleared the plates, breathed steadily, and later, alone, opened the notebook. I added a line. They're rehearsing my removal. I slept badly, waking at 3:11 a.m. I made tea. The kettle popped, the fridge hummed. The porch light pooled on the steps, a moth circling. The lemon tree shivered. The house felt like a person trying not to cough. In the morning, my key didn't turn at all. I rang the bell. Ethan opened the door. We changed the locks for security, he said. Don't take it personally. Security from whom? Give me the new key, I said. He hesitated, then handed over a tagged spare. Downstairs only. Only. I felt a chapter end and another begin without me. I went to my room, lifted the suitcase, set it on the bed. I didn't pack. I measured. How quickly could I move if I had to? What would I refuse to leave? Richard's coat, the wedding china, the blue napkins, the notebook. The list was short. That made me sad then strong. Before I left that day, I opened the safe, removed the title folder, and slipped it into my tote with the precision of a nurse drawing a line of medication. Preparation isn't aggression. It is care. Outside, the April sky was washed and honest. I locked the car, checked my bag, and drove to Kelly's office. The tires hummed, steady as a heartbeat. If they were writing their story, I would write mine with dates, with documents, with the kind of patience that knows how to wait and when to act. On the passenger seat, the folder tapped my notebook like a metronome. I set my phone to silent and tightened my grip on the wheel. The keys in my coat pocket felt heavier than usual, useful and provisional. For now. I drove on. It happened on a Thursday evening, April 9, 2024. The day that split my life clean in half. The sun had already dipped behind the sea. The house smelled of stew and thyme. I was stacking plates when Ethan came in, jacket still on, eyes fixed somewhere past me. There was something rehearsed in the way he stood, feet braced, hands clasped like he had practiced this conversation in a mirror. Mom, he said. The pause afterward was too long. Laura's pregnant. I felt the words not as joy but as a signal. He didn't smile. No warmth, no excitement. Just an announcement delivered like paperwork. That's big news, I managed. Congratulations. He nodded but didn't thank me. Instead, he glanced toward the window, then back at me with a look I couldn't place. Her parents are moving in next week. They need the space. I waited. Surely this was about helping them find a rental. Then he said it, calm, flat, irreversible. You'll need to move out. It's best for everyone. The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered against the counter. The air thickened, heavy with something sour and final. Move out. He took a folded stack of papers from his coat pocket and placed them on the table. A contract, thick with signatures and a notary seal. The house is sold, he said. I looked down. Property transfer, $218,000 US. Under signatures, Ethan Miller and Laura Bennett. The line where my name should have been blank. I heard my voice from somewhere far away. You sold my house? He exhaled like someone tired of a long debate. Not yours, Mom. Ours. And now theirs. The silence stretched until the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I realized then that even the house seemed to be listening. I sat down slowly. Ethan, you can't sell what you don't own. He rubbed his forehead. You wouldn't understand the legal side. Laura's been helping with all of that. Laura. The name landed like a cold draft. I pictured her at the kitchen table, smiling while signing papers she had no right to touch. Help me understand, I said. My voice was steady. Years in hospitals had taught me that control is oxygen. When did this happen? A month ago. We didn't want to upset you until it was done. Done. The word struck deeper than the betrayal itself. They had chosen silence as their strategy, deceit as their method. I looked at the envelope, the embossed seal, the type date, March 12th. The day Ethan had dropped by with flowers, saying he just wanted to check on me. That was the day he'd already erased me from my own title. My throat tightened. Why? He didn't answer directly. Laura's parents need stability. They've had it rough. You've had a good life here. You can rent somewhere smaller, near the bay maybe. I wanted to ask where he'd found the authority to measure my life against theirs, but I didn't. The truth was sitting right there in front of me. A son who had converted gratitude into entitlement. He shifted, searching my face for some sign of surrender. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. I stood, walked to the window, and stared at the lemon tree outside. Petals scattered from the wind, branches bent but alive. That tree had survived storms that tore the roof twice. It would survive this too. I see, I said. And you think that's that? Mom, he began softly. We'll make sure you're comfortable. Comfortable. A word that sounds kind but means controlled. I'm sure you will, I said. I went to my room, opened the closet, and pulled out the small blue suitcase I used when visiting friends years ago. I began folding clothes, sweaters, nightgown, the navy scarf Richard had given me. Each fold steadied my breathing. I added one more thing. The manila envelope from the safe, the Miller Foundation trust and title. When I came back to the kitchen, Ethan was standing by the door, uneasy now. Mom, where are you going? For a walk, I said. And Ethan? He looked up. Lock whatever doors you want. You can't lock me out of what's mine. I left without slamming the door. The night air smelled of salt and distance. My hands were shaking, but my steps weren't. Driving toward Kelly's office, I replayed his words. It's best for everyone. He believed it. That's what frightened me most. Not the betrayal, but the calm behind it. When I reached the office, the lights were off. I sat in the car under the yellow glow of the street lamp and opened the envelope on my lap. Every line of the trust was intact. My name was the sole owner. I felt the tremor leave my hands. He had tried to steal something that couldn't be stolen, not legally, not morally, not truly. The law was still on my side now, so was clarity. I turned off the engine, leaned back, and whispered the first complete thought I'd had in hours. I'm not done. And for the first time that night, I believed myself. I didn't cry that night. I made tea in the blue mug with the chip on the rim and listened to the house breathe. Fridge hum, pipe settling, the shore wind nudging the latch. My hands were steady. I opened the notebook and wrote the date and time. April 9, 2024. 10:41 p.m. Under it, one sentence. I refused to disappear from my own life. I set the suitcase on the bed. Not to flee but to sort what mattered. 2 sweaters. Nightgown. The navy scarf Richard gave me on our 20th. The cedar box with the loose hinge. And the folder, the Miller Foundation trust and title, already in my tote like a pulse. In the mirror I looked older than morning but not undone. There's a face nurses keep for hard news. Calm, exact, kind without apology. I recognized it. I tied my hair back and wiped the counter while the kettle cooled. Routine steadies the mind. I texted Kelly. Need to meet first thing. Urgent. The dots appeared, then her reply. 8:15 a.m. Bring everything. I set the phone down like a gavel. There would be no pleading, only procedure. At 11:07 p.m. I walked the rooms once, not as a farewell but as inventory. Living room. Couch, lamp, photo of Richard with a kite at drift point. Dining room. The wall Laura tapped, the clock that clicked through our silences. Kitchen. Lemon bowl. Recipe card in my mother's script. Bedroom. Suitcase, coat, papers. I touched the doorframe where Ethan's height marks climbed like a ladder. You don't erase a ladder. You decide who gets to use it. I slid 3 spare keys onto a ring and put it in my pocket. On a post-it in the notebook I sketched a plan. Call bank. Freeze joint cards. Insurance, no address changes. Hold mail. Pull porch camera footage. Confirm trust filings. I don't like drama. I like records. At 11:32 p.m. I logged into the bank app and checked movement. 2 withdrawals I didn't recognize. Gas station, hardware. $1.94. 11 total. I saved the file to a folder named House. Evidence, April. The lemon tree tapped the window. I thought of Laura holding a pen that wasn't hers and of Ethan repeating words that sounded borrowed. Love doesn't require blindness. It asks for sight and courage. I turned off the kitchen light and let the hall nightlight mark a path to bed. Still I didn't sleep. At 2:06 a.m. I remembered the safe deposit key taped under Richard's desk drawer. I peeled it free and added it to the ring. I set the ring beside my rosary. At 4:58 a.m. I showered. Hot water then cool. I chose the dark skirt that never wrinkles and a white blouse. In the kitchen, I toasted bread, wrapped half for later, brewed coffee in the press, and opened the envelope again. The trust language was precise. Richard had insisted. Title remained with the foundation. Occupancy by board consent me. Transfer required unanimous vote me again. Whatever they'd signed would fold against this like paper against stone. I printed 3 copies. I filled my tote. Folder, notebook, charger, spare glasses, blue pen, the photograph of Richard on the pier. At 7:23 a.m. I left the house, locking the door with the key they had tried to reclassify as temporary. The morning had that pale light the coast gets after a windy night. I picked a ripe lemon and slipped it into the tote. The drive was very quiet. I practiced sentences not to rehearse anger, but to keep them brief. Unauthorized attempt to convey property. Title held by foundation. Immediate notice to vacate. Words that fit on a line and hold. Kelly's office sits above a bakery. The smell of bread rose through the stairwell as I climbed. I arrived at 8:09 a.m. Early. When Kelly opened the door, she didn't say I told you so. She said, "Good timing." We sat. I laid out the documents like instruments on a tray. Kelly read fast, lips moving. She underlined 3 sections, circled 2, and looked up steady. "All right," she said. "We'll file an emergency notice and a cease and desist. If needed, a criminal referral. Do you want officers present when we serve?" "Yes." "Then we'll schedule a lock change under your authority and a property inventory. Keep receipts, photographs, a log of all communications. Speak only through me." I nodded. It felt like an operating room before incision, quiet, focused. Kelly slid a form across. "Signed to authorize me to act for the foundation." I signed. My hand didn't tremble. "Margaret," she said, tapping her pen, "this is recoverable. They can posture, but they can't own what they never had." Recoverable. A word I'd used 1,000 times in charts for other people. Hearing it applied to my life steadied me. I left with a folder heavier than before. Not from paper but from certainty. Outside, the wind had eased. I sat in the car and peeled the lemon. The scent filled the air, bright, clean, alive. I pressed a bit of peel under my tongue. Bitter than sweet. I turned the key, checked the rearview, and said softly, "Proceed." By the time I parked in front of Kelly's office the next morning, the sun had already climbed past the courthouse clock. The sky was the pale gray of clean paper waiting. Kelly met me at the door, papers already clipped, pen tucked behind her ear. She didn't waste words. "We moved today," she said. We sat at her desk and went through the steps one by one. Petition for injunction. Verification of trust. Order to vacate within 72 hours. I initialed every page, methodical as if charting a patient's vitals. Years in nursing had trained my hand for clarity. No smudges, no hesitation. Each line I signed drew a small circle of control back to me. "You'll get an officer assigned within the hour," Kelly said. "Do you want to be present when it's served?" "Yes," I answered. "I need to see it through." At 10:43 a.m., the court clerk stamped the papers, an echoing thud that sounded almost ceremonial. The red seal pressed against the document like a pulse. Ownership reasserted, lawful and final. Kelly smiled faintly. "Congratulations, homeowner." Driving back, the sea on my right was rough, the waves breaking hard against the rocks. I rolled down the window. Salt air stung my eyes but cleared my head. When I turned onto Harbor Lane, 2 cars were already in the driveway. Ethan's sedan and a rental SUV with Ohio plates. They were unpacking boxes. I parked at the curb, stepped out, and stood beside the officer assigned to serve the order. His badge glinted in the noon light. He asked quietly, "You're the owner?" "I am," I said. He nodded once and approached the porch. Laura spotted him first. "Can I help you?" she asked, smile tightening. "Officer R. Daniels, County Property Enforcement," he said evenly. "Are you Laura Bennett?" "Yes. You and your spouse are in violation of a trust-protected title. You're required to vacate within 72 hours. Her expression flickered. Confusion, disbelief, then anger. She turned to Ethan. "What is he talking about?" Ethan's face drained of color. "Mom, what did you do?" I stepped forward, calm. "I secured what was already mine." Laura started to argue, phone raised, filming. This is harassment. My husband's name is on the contract. The contract is void, the officer interrupted. The trust predates it by 15 years. Ethan reached for my arm. Mom, please don't do this. We'll lose everything. I looked at him steadily. You already did, son. Not the house, your conscience. The officer handed them the copy of the order. Paper rustled. The sound of accountability. He gave them the timeline. 72 hours to remove belongings, 0 authority to change locks or transfer utilities. Laura lowered her phone. For the first time, she looked unsure of her own script. I watched without gloating. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. When the officer left, I walked to the porch. The lemon tree brushed my shoulder. A petal fell on the step. Ethan stood by the boxes, eyes wet but unblinking. Where will we go? He asked. There's a difference, I said quietly, between needing help and taking what isn't offered. You'll figure it out. I went inside. The air smelled like their cologne and cardboard. On the table lay one of my blue napkins stained with coffee. I folded it and set it aside. Some things can still be washed clean. That evening, Kelly called to confirm the filing had posted. They'll probably try to appeal, she warned. Let them, I said. Paper against paper. At dusk, I sat on the porch with tea. The street was quiet except for the sea's low growl. From upstairs came muffled voices, packing, perhaps crying, but no shouting. I could live with that. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands still and waits to be noticed. At 9:12 p.m. my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I'm sorry. We thought you'd be okay. We were scared. I typed, you should be learning, not fearing. Then I deleted it. Silence would say enough. Before bed, I walked through the house again. The rooms were half empty but peaceful. In the kitchen, I placed the court-stamped folder beside the kettle. The lemon I had carried from that morning sat next to it, bright under the lamp. I opened my notebook and wrote, April 10, 2024. 9:45 p.m. Recovery begins with paperwork and ends with peace. When I closed the notebook, I realized my hands were finally still. I turned off the lights and left only the porch lamp burning. It threw a soft halo across the threshold, the line between what was once taken and what was reclaimed. The next morning, the officer would return to confirm departure. I would make coffee, slice bread, and hand him a cup. Not out of celebration, but completion. Whatever came next, it would be on my terms. Morning made the kitchen bright again, but not gentler. The officer arrived at 8:31 a.m. Boots scuffing the porch I had scrubbed for decades. He knocked with the knuckles of someone who brings news and order at once. I opened the door and stepped aside. The lemon scent from last night clung to the air like a promise kept. Laura was ready with her phone. Smile, she muttered, angling the camera toward the badge. Her voice tried for cheerful. Her eyes didn't. Ethan stood behind her, unshaven, holding a box he had never packed carefully in his life. Good morning, the officer said. I'm here to confirm compliance with the court order. She swung the lens from him to me. This is elder abuse, she announced, playing to an audience she hoped would arrive later. My followers will. He raised a palm. Ma'am, please lower the device. Why? She challenged, still recording. The internet should see this theft. It's not theft, he said, and the calm in his voice cut through the kitchen like a ruler through paper. It's enforcement. You are violating the law. The words landed. Her hand wobbled. The video caught a crooked view of the wall she wanted to knock down. She lowered the phone but didn't pocket it. Performers rarely exit before their last line. Ethan set the box on a chair and faced me. Mom, we can fix this. We'll talk to Kelly. We'll make payments. You'll leave, I said softly. The rest can be discussed in writing. He swallowed. We'll lose everything. You already lost something, I answered. Not a roof. A compass. Silence spread between us, not empty but instructive. I could see the boy he once was. Dirt on knees, kite string cutting his palm. Learning the hard lesson that wanting does not equal deserving. Laura broke first. My parents arrived tonight. Where are they supposed to go? To the plans you made that didn't include me, I said. You were very thorough on paper. Her jaw tightened. Everyone will judge you. Everyone can read, I replied, nodding to the folder on the table. They'll find the truth there. The officer cleared his throat. You have until 8:31 a.m. 3 days from now. No lock changes, no removals beyond personal effects. Utilities remain as is. Any interference will trigger immediate removal. And if we appeal? Laura asked. Then you file and wait, he said. Today you comply. She looked to Ethan for rescue. He was already unraveling, grief and calculation wrestling behind his eyes. He turned to me, voice small. Mom, please. Say something I can hold on to. I thought of the blue napkins, the wedding china, the doorframe marks. I thought of the lemon tree, rooted, weathered, still giving fruit. I picked up the small bowl of lemons, chose one, and placed it in his hand. Hold on to this, I said. Remember that bitterness can be useful when it warns you what not to taste again. His fingers closed around the fruit like a child around a marble. He looked down, ashamed. The officer finished his checklist, dated the notice, and asked me to sign. My pen moved without tremor. Ink dried quickly. Authority quicker. As they carried boxes to the cars, Laura tried one last line for her unseen crowd. We never meant for it to end like this, she called over her shoulder. You meant it to end without me, I answered. That's different. On the porch I paused. The morning wind had risen, combing the lemon leaves into a soft hiss. The house felt lighter, not because people were leaving, but because truth had entered and stood where it needed to. Ethan approached again, empty-handed now. Will you ever forgive us? Forgiveness isn't a key I hand out, I said. It's a door you build. He nodded, defeated but hearing me. That was new. He got into the car. The engine coughed, then caught. Laura didn't look back. When they drove off to find temporary shelter and explanations, the officer tipped his cap. You did this the right way. Only way, I said. Inside, I rinsed 2 cups, set them to dry, and folded the blue napkins. I opened the window. Salt air swept the room. On the table, the stamped order lay beside the notebook and a single bright peel of lemon like a ribbon that had fallen off a gift. I pressed the peel to my wrist and breathed. That night I slept. No doorbell ghosts, no rehearsed speeches echoing in the hall. Just the ordinary sound of a house being what it is when no one performs inside it. Quiet, honest, awake to itself. The scene in the kitchen had not been an ending. It was a mirror turned the right way. What I saw reflected was not my loss but my line. And once a line is drawn, even love must learn where to stop and where to ask permission to begin again. In the quiet after, I realized the shock had disguised the truth. I hadn't lost a home. I had located myself. The revelation was simple and heavy as a key in the palm. I decide the threshold. I decide who is welcome. True. News travels faster than apology. By Monday, the story had a headline. A neighbor sent me a link with no comment. Local couple probed over fraudulent home transfer. The article was careful, but the facts were plain. An attempted conveyance without authority, a trust ignored, a court order served. No names printed, but our street is small. Laura posted a video that afternoon. Eyes glossy, voice trembling on cue. She framed it as a misunderstanding, a family dispute, an overreaction. In the comments, sympathy arrived in the first dozen lines. Then someone asked about the trust. Another linked the county filing. The tone shifted. Ethan texted at 5:42 p.m. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Can we talk? I typed and deleted 3 replies before sending one. Communicate through Kelly. By Wednesday, Laura's employer placed her on leave, pending review. She worked in client accounts, trust matters there too. Ethan's manager, who once ate at my table, said he was taking time. Time is an interesting word. It covers both absence and consequence. Laura's parents arrived to a motel 2 towns over. The rate chewed through their savings faster than they admitted. They had expected my guest room. They got a nightly bill and a view of the ice machine. They called once from an unfamiliar number. I let it ring, then told Kelly. Boundaries hold best when they are simple. 1 door, 1 lock, 1 channel. At church, I kept my usual pew. People approached with careful faces. We're praying for you, Mrs. Donnelly said, squeezing my shoulder. And for Ethan, I added. She nodded. The county investigator met me Thursday to verify documents in sequence. I made tea and laid out the timeline, dates, messages, the contract, the trust. He took photographs, asked measured questions, and thanked me for being organized. I have spent a lifetime making hard jobs easier. The skill still fits. Not every consequence was public. Utilities sent notice of attempted changes. We reversed them. The locksmith's receipt matched the day my key first stuck. The bank flagged 2 more small purchases on a card Ethan had used for emergencies. I closed the account and mailed a check to cover what remained. There were awkward moments. A friend of Laura's tried to corner me in the market, asking for my side while filming near the apples. I looked at the camera and said, "The side with paper." She lowered the phone. Ethan's second text arrived late Friday. "Mom, I'm scared. We might get charged." I sat with the message a while. I remembered the boy practicing his signature in 4th grade. Now his name on a contract had taught him its weight. I replied, "You are responsible for what you sign." Then I watered the lemon tree. Laura messaged me Saturday, a blend of apology and strategy. "If we go public together, we can control the narrative. You can say we misunderstood. It will protect Ethan." I forwarded it to Kelly and did not respond. A week after the notice, they moved into Laura's cousin's spare room. The cousin posted a photo. 4 pairs of shoes by a narrow door. I stared at it longer than I expected. Consequences have a human size. They look like shared closets, borrowed kettles, whispered arguments behind thin walls. The investigation continued, slow as in 4 drip. There was talk of charges, then of a pretrial program, then of restitution. I kept out of the weeds. The law would speak its language in its time. My role was to keep my own house in order. Replace the scuffed chair, repaint the nicked baseboard, return the blue napkins to their drawer. People asked if I felt vindicated. The word didn't land. I felt precise. The house was steady again. The lemon tree bloomed once more. I slept 8 hours and woke to gulls. I brewed coffee and didn't brace for footsteps on the stairs that weren't mine. Ethan tried one more approach. Flowers on the porch with a note. "Please talk to me. I love you." I brought the bouquet inside, trimmed the stems, and set them in water. Love is still true where it is true. But I slid the note into the notebook beside the word boundaries. Both could exist. By month's end, their friends had learned to stop asking me for comment. The story had lost its shine. Online, Laura's followers moved on to newer dramas. In real life, rent was due. Work had to be found. Apologies had to be decided, not performed. One evening, I walked past the doorframe where Ethan's heights were penciled. 5, 8, 11, 14. Marks of growth, proof of time spent rising. I pressed my thumb to the highest line and whispered, "Keep going." It wasn't a curse or a pardon. It was permission he'd have to grant himself. Consequences for them had begun and would continue. Quietly, stubbornly, without spectacle. For me, the consequence was peace, and peace at last was enough. I put the court folder on its shelf, turned off the light and listened to the sea. Sounded like closure. 6 months later, I live in a cottage by the sea. A quiet, white house with 3 windows facing the water. The salt air keeps the curtains in gentle motion, as if the wind itself were tidying the room. I wake early, brew coffee, and watch the waves shoulder against the rocks. I used to think peace was silence. Now I know it's the absence of fear. I keep the blue napkins, the chipped mug, and Richard's coat. Everything else I gave away. There's no need to guard objects when you finally guard yourself. The neighbors bring bread, and I trade them lemons from a small tree that now grows in my yard, cut from a branch of the one I left behind. Roots like strength can be transplanted. Some mornings I volunteer at the nursing home. I fold linens, take blood pressure, listen to the soft stories people tell when they think no one will remember them. I do remember. Each face teaches me that survival isn't loud. It's simply continued presence. Ethan writes every few weeks. His messages are short, polite, cautious, like someone touching a doorknob that once burned his hand. I answer kindly without reopening the past. Forgiveness doesn't erase, it redefines. He says the baby laughs often. I hope that laughter becomes his redemption. Kelly and I still meet for tea every month. We've turned the Miller Foundation into a scholarship for nursing students who remind me of my younger self. Steady, unseen, and essential. Watching their letters of thanks arrive feels like a different kind of motherhood, one that gives without being emptied. In the evenings, I bake bread and share it with neighbors who never ask about the story. My house smells of rosemary and quiet. Sometimes I sit on the porch, candle flickering, notebook open, and write only one line before closing it. Peace is ownership of the self. I have it now. Entirely. My son once said Laura's family deserved my house. He was wrong. What I deserved was freedom, the kind that comes after losing what was never love, only leverage. I thought the day he changed the locks was my ending. It wasn't. It was my invitation back to myself. Now I live with less but feel multiplied. I own my time, my quiet, my dignity. I don't wait for apologies, I build around them. The sea outside my window never keeps shape, yet it keeps returning. So do I. If this story found you, hold its truth gently. You can survive betrayal and still remain kind. You can start again without permission. If this touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe to hear more truths where silence becomes strength. Because the home we fight for isn't built of walls but of worth. And once rebuilt, it can never be taken again.